All right. Well, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us this evening, this afternoon. My name is Troy Williams. I am one of the co-founders here at CS for Success, along with Abril Vela and Julia Flores. We are CS for Success is a computer science education consulting company. We advocate for and equitable computer science education for high school students, for middle school students, and everyone along the pipeline. So once again, thank you for joining us this evening for our March installment of Let's Chat. We are very excited to be talking today about fundraising. And so we're very fortunate to have a guest with us today who has a lot of experience in that area. So with us today is Bob Hubberts. He's the president of First Illinois Robotics. So Bob has been involved in youth robotics for 22 years and is currently president of First Illinois Robotics. He also does pro bono consulting for nonprofit organizations through his involvement as an engagement manager with the Executive Service Corps. Bob is retired from Motorola Solutions after a long career in finance and operational roles, and also served as the executive sponsor for Motorola with First Robotics on a global basis. So a wealth of experience, a wealth of knowledge. Really excited about today's discussion. And so without further ado, I want to bring Bob into the fold. Bob, thank you so much for being with us today.
It's great to be here.
Absolutely, absolutely. So want to jump right into things and as far as fundraising goes. Can you tell us a little bit about how your experience at a corporate finance level has influenced your role as president at a nonprofit?
So, thanks. And as I said, it's great to be here. So, my experience in Motorola, I was most of my assignments were with a business unit. Some of them bigger, some of them smaller, and it's almost like you're running a little company. And a lot of people in the nonprofit world can lose sight of there's lots of people that have lots of wonderful things on the mission, but they also have to run it in a way that can deliver what they want to deliver, and people still need to get paid. And so I think partly some of my experience just in running businesses has helped as I've gotten involved in nonprofits. And then the other thing is, when you're in the corporate world, you're working with people and making proposals on different deals. A lot about fundraising is you going out and explaining what you do and putting together a proposal. So there's a lot of skills you get in any range when you're out in whether it's an education or in a company that you can bring to bear in the nonprofit world.
Okay, yeah, awesome. So why do you believe an individual tends to get involved and or support STEM programming?
So, let me talk a little bit about my journey first, and I think maybe it gives some examples. So I got involved 22 years ago. My son was in 4th grade, and his school was looking for somebody to coach his robotics team. Well, I'm an accountant. I don't know anything about robotics. So I went and was learning 2 weeks before the kids, right? Yeah. And I started out being, how do I help my son? But quickly I realized that what this program had to offer that I was involved in. And as you got different people, some of them were because, again, it was their child. Others were just passionate. They're passionate about, computer science. They're passionate about STEM, and they want to help kids, and they want to, to help them to learn. So individuals, come from a personal interest, from a family interest, but also this general, how do we do a better job with society, and how do we educate kids? As you get into why companies are interested, I'll talk about my experience. So again, I started out coaching my son, loved it. Even when he was done, I stayed involved. I stayed volunteering, running tournaments, still helping to mentor some teams. But as you talk to companies, there's a couple reasons. One, they're doing it because they're employees and they're helping their employees. The second one is they're helping the local community. They're being a good citizen of the community. And the third thing is sometimes there's some self-interest because they want kids to learn to be engineers so they can have a workforce. And so, people have lots of great reasons for wanting to volunteer individually or contribute individually, and also, as entities.
Okay. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think organizations getting involved, I think at a certain level, it builds community. And then you're right, it serves their greater purposes, as there's a lot of gaps in employment when in the STEM fields. And so having those relationships for future connections is really key. Um, do you, are there any trends that you've seen in what programs do or don't get major funding, specifically in the area of STEM? But yeah.
So I think just, the first thing you have to do is understand the people that you're asking for donations from.
Okay.
And when you look through whether it's a company or a foundation, they can be more very documented, right?
Right.
And I'll use the Motorola example.
Okay.
They have a foundation, and there are only two areas that they donate to. Okay. One is related to public safety, police departments, fire departments, ambulance, because that's their business. Okay. And the second one is STEM. Yeah. And so there are other entities out there, and people will start, and we did some of this with our organization as we were fundraising. You think, oh, such and such a company, they're great, they'd be a great sponsor, and you go through a lot of work, and you find out that they had stated goals on their website that said, these are the kind of things that we go and fund. So, you want to do some research and look for who are the STEM funders that are interested in the areas that your program's involved in. And, there's no sense wasting a lot of effort on a company or a foundation or an individual who really is interested in a different kind of philanthropy at this point, right? So one is really just trying to identify the funnel of who you're looking at. The other one is criteria, and some of these same funders will tell you not only that they're interested in STEM, but what outcomes they're looking for. And when you're small, sometimes it's really hard, but they want you to demonstrate certain outcomes if you want to get this grant or this donation. When I was with Motorola, I also helped the foundation as a reviewer of grant proposals from different organizations. And they had a framework that some of it was on their website and said, they have to have this and this and this and this, and people should know that when they're coming in looking for money. And it's about outcomes, right? And what they're trying to achieve with their program. Other things they didn't always publish, but you want to make sure that your goals are aligned with what the people you're asking money for, what they're aligned with, right? And some of it, as I said, is easy as researching it on their website.
Okay. Yeah. So that makes a lot of sense. So understand what you're trying to do, what your goals are. Mm-hmm. Try to research which organizations or individuals might be funding that sort of work, and try to align your requests to what they're providing via grant or funding. Okay. Yep. Makes a lot of sense.
So there's one more aspect to that also. Right. And, it depends on what you're doing. Okay. In our case, we're doing youth robotics. Right? Okay. Seeing is believing. Yeah. So if we can get people to an event, if we can get people to look at a YouTube video of the activity, and seeing kids getting excited about programming or building a robot, can sell what we're doing much better than I can explain it. So where you had, and I'm not saying, oh, use kids as a props. No, I mean, these kids are excited about it. They want to talk about it, right? Their parents want to talk about it. So, the more you can show what you're doing, if it's possible. Some of these things sell themselves, right? Just with enthusiasm.
Yeah. I think connecting a potential funder with students or the youth or whatever group it is that you're trying to impact. And that also could assist in showing what some of the gaps are. Like, hey, look, we have this set up. We want to expand. We have a waiting list for our program. We just need more resources in order to grow this, and look at the impact that it can make. So yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Absolutely.
Okay. So in addition to a couple of the things that you've already mentioned, like what strategies have you seen work well in fundraising for STEM programs? And are there any strategies that you've struggled with, or they just may be more difficult to implement?
Yeah, so I think one of the things that I realized early on was that you had to put some things together, because many funders want to have certain things. They want you to put together a basic budget. They want you to be able to tell them what your mission is and what your goals are. So you have to have your toolkit, and you might as well invent it right up front and put it together right up front, because a lot of people are going to ask you for some of the exact same things, right?
Okay.
As you get into and there's a couple things, especially with companies, that you want to make sure you do, or individuals for that matter. Every time somebody donates money to your organization, if you're a non-for-profit, you should ask them if their company has a matching gift program. It's easy doubling that a lot of people miss, right? And when you ask somebody, they're like, oh yeah, my company has a matching grant. Okay, can you put in a matching grant? Because you just doubled their donation. Right? The other thing, if you have volunteers that are helping your program, ask them if their company has a volunteer match. A lot of companies will give donations to non-for-profits based on volunteer hours. So every time we do an event, we do a lot of volunteer events. Every time that we go out to all of our volunteers, does your company have a volunteer hour match program? If they do, please put in your hours. And it's there are things that people don't think about a lot of times, but a lot of companies have put these in place, and it helps to get these volunteer grants. I mentioned the seeing is believing. You got to remember to try and put that one that out in front of people, right? Yeah. I think the thing that we struggled with at times, your goals, okay? And like, for example, one of our goals was to grow our robotics activities in Chicago public schools. But it's a nice statement and it's a great direction, but a lot of funders are looking for, well, exactly what's that mean? How many teams are you going to have? And so there's a lot of desires to look at outcomes and statistics, right? And when you get into STEM, there's some funders that'll say, well, can you show me the trends in positive attitude about STEM? It's really hard to measure some of those things. So, I think that goes back to knowing what people are interested in and seeing if you can come up with some framework to measure the effectiveness of your program. Because, there's a lot of donors out there for STEM that are more than happy to be repeat donors and provide funding in the first year and the second year and the third year. But a lot of them are looking for that. Okay, you said you were going to do this. What were you able to do? So the thing that's been difficult is that some of the outcomes they're looking to measure are really hard to measure. How do you measure if a child is more interested in computer science now than they were before the program? Right? You kind of know in your gut, but it's really hard to measure it. Right?
Yeah. Are there evaluations that the kids could take before and after? Would that be a potential solve for something like that? Or
it absolutely is. It absolutely is. And it just goes to, as you get, you have to decide which things might be helpful for you as an organization and see if those would fit with what people are looking for or different funders. But some of them, you might need to implement some special things to try and answer the questions of what your funders are looking for, right? And different funders have different requirements. We have a grant program that we do, and it's for teams that are having, can demonstrate a financial need. And it's pretty simple. We want a summary of your season, and they want some pictures. They want to see it, So, it really comes back to knowing the people that you're getting funding from and what it is they're looking for, right?
Yeah. Being in the current environment that we're in, so the pandemic is starting to let up a little bit.
Yeah.
And but I'm just curious, from your perspective, maybe the last couple of years, from an implementation standpoint, I can only imagine that that gravely impacted the ability to serve the people you want to serve, as far as having them be hands-on.
Mhm.
What, and I'm kind of throwing you a curveball here,
Yeah, that's
but
fine. No, it's fine.
what have you seen any strategies in a remote learning environment that work? I know, I could imagine it's difficult getting the robotics equipment to students, or, so yeah, can you maybe talk a little bit about what you've seen in the last couple of years, and if you've seen anything that's worked in that environment, or has it just been a struggle, just like a lot of other things?
So that, thank you for that question, because
Yeah.
it's been kind of fundamental to our
Mhm.
programming. But, before COVID, we had about 1,000 teams in Illinois and about 9,000 kids on teams.
Mhm.
And for our 2020, and we go school year. Our
Yeah.
program, we tie it to schools because there's so many schools about it.
Yeah.
So for our 2020, and we had to cancel some things in 2020 when COVID first hit, but we were almost done with our season. So it was less of an impact on the 1920 season. But for
Mhm.
2021, we couldn't have any physical events, and a lot of ours is about events. And there's also the team meetings. So we saw a drop off of about 60% in teams.
Yeah.
And, it really was so powerful to see some of the teachers who went above and beyond to try and come up with ways to do this on a remote basis.
Okay.
And, so they actually, for our first Lego League, which is our 4th through 8th grade program, the robot goes out and does things. So the program is around the world, and everybody has the same challenge. And so they actually took some of the challenges and broke them up and mailed them to individual kids so they could work on individual pieces. And they did as much as they could at Zoom, and they would have one kid building and everybody like, oh, put that piece there, put that piece there. And it was much slower. So for last season, we did all of our events virtually, and we got volunteers. They taped the robots running. It did require some element of kids being together for some meetings, but the parents and the coaches of those teams found ways to do it in a safe way. And we had a completely remote tournament season with judges doing it over Zoom or watching a video. So this season, as things started getting, kids were more in school, some of there was more willingness by school districts to have after school activities. We had a little bit more in person. We were able to come back to some hybrid events that we did where we limited attendance. We didn't run our tournaments the same way, but we had physical experiences. So it's amazing how people get creative, right? And one of our so we have 4 different age group programs, and one of them is a 7th through 12th grade program. And our program director, he went as far as getting a team of alumni who developed a fully remote experience. So they duplicated their whole robotics season for this program and challenged kids to do it with a virtual simulator that they could build, and the simulator would actually, and it worked or didn't work a lot like a real robot, but they actually came up with a simulator. So we believe that the activity is much better in person, but creative people find creative ways to do things, and the wonderful thing is we still had kids learning. So
Okay. So the reason why I asked you that is
Yeah.
because I was curious if there was a reduction in the ability to implement. How did that impact funding? Is it that the funding was it was already solidified, so it was a minimal impact, or did you see a situation where funders were kind of taking a step back because it wasn't necessarily going to be a safe investment in
Mhm.
a world that's unsure of how you can implement your programs?
So we ended up doing fine because a lot of our costs are for the physical events, and when the physical events
Yeah.
went away, the need for some of that fundraising went away. But for example, Motorola, the one I mentioned, they came out right away and said, you know what, we're going to put more of our money into public safety because we need to help facilitate some of what's going on with COVID, and we're going to do a little less STEM. So there was some of that. Overall, if I go to my experience with Executive Service Corps, a lot of nonprofits did very well during the pandemic in terms of fundraising. Foundations were very generous. Grantors were very generous. Our main sponsors for our activity stuck with us. So there's some natural things that dropped off because if you weren't doing a certain set of tournaments, then funders weren't going to fund them. But overall, there was a lot of people out there trying to fund any kind of learning for kids and around STEM.
Okay. Yeah. So and you touched on this a little bit already,
Yeah.
but as far as crafting like the perfect pitch, so I think you've thrown some hints already as far as having an understanding of your goals and researching to identify funders that offer funding that would support what your program goals are. Are there any other strategies or advice you would give as far as putting together a high quality pitch, or if you know any resources that
Yeah.
the people watching who are interested could access to try to figure out? Because that, for me, the fundraising that I've had to do, that's always the tough part. Like, preparing for the meeting
Right.
for the pitch,
Right.
because sometimes you only got one shot. So
right. Yeah. Right. And they're so first of all, don't be boring. I mean, so in a lot of funding situations, you're right. You have this one chance to sell them on the idea, and you need a very good overview presentation that hits the highlights of what you're doing, hits what the goals are. That's not going to be the same data that you need later if you end up being able to put in a detailed proposal, in which case you're going to go into all that detail. But you have to be careful that you can show what you're trying to do for who and what the benefit would be. And especially you talk about what you guys are trying to do in the with the city of Chicago schools. There's a lot of funders that are really interested in helping in that, and to show again, what's the program trying to accomplish, what are the age groups, what's the population that you're showing, and try and hit some of those high points. And it doesn't have to be a fancy multimedia video extravaganza, but a couple simple words on a piece of charts is probably not it either, right? You need to get some of those points across. And again, you have to know who you're talking to and a little bit about what they're looking for, right? The other thing, past accomplishments, right? I mean, you've got to show what you've already done and impacts that you've made and outcomes and on the community. So, again, I'll go back to my first example, and they had the benefit. So first in Illinois, I mentioned we had about 9,000 participants.
Okay.
First around the globe has 700,000 participants and 300,000 volunteers or coaches. So a million people. They have done some multi-year with Brandeis University, multi-year studies on tracking kids and can show great data. But I go back to this, whether it's simple surveys. I had 15 kids and at the end of this, 3/4 of them felt that they knew more about STEM, and they really were interested in doing the program again. And, so, outcomes. People want to know outcomes. What are you trying to accomplish? What have you accomplished? And, there's a lot of people out there looking for money with STEM, which is wonderful, but there's a lot of competition for those dollars, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
The other thing, go ahead.
No, you go.
So I was just going to mention too that there is, like, even for our activity, there's some multi-levels to this,
Mhm.
because I have to raise money for us to run training and for us to have people to coordinate the activity in Illinois and to run tournaments. Okay.
Mhm.
On the other level, the individual robotics teams or schools. So a school may have a team, they need money to pay for the robot and for registrations and various things. And so you have this multi-level piece. So some of our fundraising, we're also, in addition to raising money for ourselves, we're out there trying to find grants that we can provide to teams. So, so we had robotics teams this year that got that received money from Amazon Future Engineers. So, as an organization, we're also tried to help identify grant opportunities that teams could apply for. So I think that whether it's LinkedIn or organizations like your own, I think that you really have to go out and do some work and see, people are communicating what kind of grants and funders are out there for STEM, and so that you can, get in those queues. There's lots of people that are interested in this area, and it's just see if you can match up and find them.
Okay. So, yeah, as far as pitches go, I'm going to try to summarize, and I need you to correct me.
Yeah, that's fine.
But I think I picked up on 3 really important things. So one is make sure you're pitching to the right people. So know your audience.
Mm-hmm.
And then once you're doing the pitch, know your audience, like know what they, come with energy.
Yes, absolutely.
keep them engaged. So yeah. And then be able to communicate what outcomes you want to have, and
right.
Putting those components together could potentially make for a really successful pitch, is what I'm hearing.
Absolutely. And if you have a video, if you have some pictures you can share with them, anything that shows them is also a wonderful thing. We have robotics. We have trial robotics that we bring to funders and companies and let them play with them a little bit. This is what the kids would have, and so it's all those things help, because again, there's lots of competition for funders.
Yeah, I would tell a story about a pitch that happened where a Brill did a really good job as a high school student, but I won't embarrass her right now. I don't want to get yelled at.
So
Yeah.
let me I'll just put another thing in there. So we have funders, and I mentioned we have programs that are for very young, 4th to 8th grade, high school, and we have a couple of big companies. They only are interested in the high school program, right? Because one of their big interests is the community, but it's also they want those kids to remember in 4 years when they're in college that maybe I should go back to this company for an internship or work there afterwards. So they weren't as interested in the young kids as the older kids. We had other people who only wanted to focus on the younger kids, and they were a little bit less focused on this. I want employees, and they were more focused on their employees and community. So getting into even the demographics of what kind of kids, what kind of program, whether it's computer science or math or what element of STEM, because they do have some biases that they're looking for, and you have to try and figure those out as you're going through. It's not always easy, but
yeah. One more thing is, when I was working directly in education, and I know there were a lot of teachers and administrators who would apply for grants, but weren't necessarily grant writers.
yes.
Do you have any advice for someone who's a novice to being involved with grants?
It's a really tough one. right?
Yeah.
They're overwhelming because you go in there and some of these people are funders or foundations are looking for so much activity. The only thing I can say is make sure you don't miss any key requirements like dates, right? If it says it has to be in by January 10th, it's got to be in by January 10th. And there's simple things where I know people have missed where, a week later they try and like, sorry, we're not going to take it. So I think it's try and do your best. Try not to be overwhelmed and see if you can hit some of those key nuggets on absolute requirements. I'm not aware of a lot of pro bono fund grant writers. I mean, there's a lot of people who will write grants for a fee, but that, a lot of people just can't afford that in their programs. But it is definitely an expertise, and unfortunately, you just got to kind of plow in.
Yeah, cool. Well, we're we're about at time, Bob. Do you have any parting shots, any key highlights that you would want our audience to take away as far as fundraising goes?
So, it never hurts to ask, right? And
Yeah.
and network of and think about all the different people that connect with your community, whether they're local companies, bigger companies. We have robotics teams that get the local grocery store to sponsor them, and so reach out and don't be afraid to get no for an answer. And a key one that I missed in here is that, and this can be a positive for a lot of the people who are doing grants and fundraising, value that they have their employees volunteering. So there may be an aspect that you can get money and volunteers. And where you do have volunteers, making sure you're leveraging to see the connections they have with companies or affiliates or somebody they know. Both ways, volunteers can bring money in and money can bring volunteers in.
Awesome. Well, do you have any websites or any contact information you'd like to share before we close out?
So anybody who wants to know about robotics with FIRST can go to www.firstillinoisrobotics.org. And if you're interested as a nonprofit, and the Executive Service Corps does charge, it's pennies on the dollar from professional consulting. They do have pro bono work. If you're a nonprofit, look up Executive Service Corps in Chicago, and maybe there's some things that Executive Service Corps can do to help their mission.
Thank you.
Okay.
So we would like to thank our guest today, Bob Hubbards, for joining us. We are CS for Success. We are a for-profit computer science education consulting company. We provide services for curricular support, for programming support out of school time, anything that connects students to computer science education opportunities. So feel free to go to our website as well, cs4success.com. Thank you again, Bob, for joining us. Thanks to my co-partners, Abril and Julia. This has been a wonderful conversation, very rich with information. And yeah, I hope this helps someone. Definitely helped me. Look forward to next month when we do this all over again and with the next topic. So thank you, everyone. Thank you, Bob.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay.